get to introduce the folks who are going to be doing a little bit of a debate here. And so I decided I better go do my due diligence and look up Mark Cuban and figure out what it is I needed to say about the man. So of course, I went to Wikipedia and I looked him up. And here's the first 2 sentences of his description in Wikipedia. Mark Cuban, born July 31st, 1958 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, is an American billionaire entrepreneur. He is owner of the Dallas Mavericks, an NBA franchise, and chairman of HDNet, an HD TV cable network. That about sums up Mark Cuban. I would like to add a couple more things. Mark has been an outspoken critic of big media trying to use its ownership of content to trample on rights and to trample on alternative business models that people come up with. He supported EFF very generously in the Grokster case, and he's also been outspoken about the prevalence of content on YouTube, which is something that he's going to be talking about tonight. The other debator is Fred von Lohmann, and of course, since I looked up Mark on Wikipedia, I had to look up Fred on Wikipedia. Fred, I'm sorry to report, has a very sad and boring entry on Wikipedia. So any of you who know Fred, who feel like going in and editing it and making it more interesting, it could be really fun to see what you can come up with. Anyway, Fred starts. Fred von Lohmann is a senior staff attorney with the Electronic Frontier Foundation, specializing in intellectual property matters. Yep, that's Fred. What it doesn't say is that Fred has been named one of the 100 most influential lawyers in California for 3 years running by a respected legal newspaper called the Daily Journal. He's also received a California Lawyer of the Year award from California Lawyer magazine, and he was named one of the 50 agenda setters by the UK publication Silicon.com. Fred's views differ a bit from Mark's on YouTube, hence the debate format. So I'm now going to pass this on to Fred and Mark. Come on up.
So I gotta say, in the weeks running up to this event,
you took notes? That is so not fair since you set this up.
It's just one page. So the thing that everyone said, as I was telling people about this event, the thing that I kept hearing over and over again, just so you know, we sort of agreed on a little format here where I'm going to ask Mark a question, he answers it, and then I answer it, and then he gets to ask me a question, and we do that back and forth for a bit. So the first question I'm going to ask him, this is the one everyone who I talked to about this wanted me to ask you, Mark. They all said, why does Mark care so much about YouTube and the YouTube copyright situation? So answer that, and then I'll try to say why I care.
It's a very simple answer, because it's the cockroach in the kitchen concept. It's the same thing that happened with Napster. You know, we know it's going to keep on going and going and going, and there's no end to it. So unless you set the ground rules to respect copyright at some level, people just aren't ever going to respect it. It in fact induces people to disrespect copyright, because it's, particularly with YouTube, because it's the legitimacy of Google applied to infringement. So people are thinking, look, my buddy just uploaded this to YouTube, it's owned by Google, it must be okay. And then, you know, Joe Blow opens up a little website and says, you know what, I'm just going to upload my own content, use all the same forms, get an agent for the DMCAs, then I'll put up Google AdSense, and, you know, they're not going to know it's me because I'm going to put in fake anything. I might make $1,000, $1,500 a week till they shut me down. Then I'll go to another site, and it goes forever and ever and ever, and there's no way to stop it.
So for you, it's not just YouTube, it's all the future YouTube.
It's just a concept. I mean, this concept isn't just ever going to be just about YouTube. It's going to be applied to everything.
Okay, well, let me try to answer why I care about YouTube, and I think this will actually set the stage for a big part of our debate here. I worry that if YouTube loses the lawsuit with Viacom, it will end up doing harm to the DMCA safe harbors. Those are the chief legal precedents that YouTube and all of the other video hosting and other user-generated content sites are relying on. Because after all, once you let users upload things, some of them will probably upload things that aren't theirs. And if you're responsible for every one of those mistakes, it can be awfully hard to stay in business. And those safe harbors don't just apply to YouTube. So here I agree with Mark in the sense, for me, it's not a fight about YouTube. It's a fight for a larger precedent. And if you look at the companies, in fact, if you look at most of the internet, the sort of leading internet companies that we've all come to know, companies like Yahoo, companies like Google, companies like eBay, Amazon, and more recently MySpace, and all of these companies that rely on users uploading things, all of them depend on the same legal protections that YouTube is relying on in this lawsuit. So for me, it's about protecting the space for that innovation and those companies to develop. So,
Well, and I'm all for the DMCA, don't get me wrong. I don't think the DMCA is the problem. I don't think that YouTube qualifies for the DMCA and its privileges of the safe harbor. So I'll ask you a question. It's very difficult to filter content and copyrights, even though it's doable. I mean, YouTube will do it for you if you agree to their terms. But one of the things that isn't happening with YouTube or any of the other sites is they don't confirm who their customer is. If you want to be a web host and qualify, great. If you want to be an ISP and qualify, great. But you probably should know who your customer is, don't you think? Should it be required that in order to be considered a web host or an ISP, that you confirm and know who your customers are?
I actually don't think that should be the rule. I mean, in the first place, there's certainly nothing in the DMCA safe harbors that require that. There's nothing in the statute. Maybe Congress and the lobbyists who were involved in 1998 didn't think about that issue, but whatever the reason, it's not in there. From my perspective, though, it shouldn't be in there, because as I think everybody here who's part of a lot of these new businesses that are developing realize, you don't want a situation where you have to have an address and a credit card number and a subscriber agreement and everything with everybody before they're allowed to post anything, say anything, upload anything, comment to anything. Now sure, you can if you want. I mean, I'm not saying you should always have no relationship, not know who people are. But the same token, I don't think we should live in a world where everyone has to fingerprint, ID, identify every subscriber before you can participate in the networked information economy.
See, I believe that if you're a web host or you're an ISP, you have to have customers. That, back in 1998 when all this was going down, that was the perception that these were people who had a relationship with their customer. They knew who their customer was. And if there was an infringement, then they would be able to contact. And in fact, there were a lot of battles going around then about subpoenas issuing to identify users, right? And so people were concerned about it, but they still put that in, knowing that requirement would help reduce infringement and help give the means for copyright owners to deal with infringement. So if you're a web host, if you're an ISP, it should be natural for you to know who your customers are, unless you have intent to induce people not to respect copyright.
Well, wait, what do you think about, obviously, Hotmail, right? Microsoft doesn't really know who those users are. You can put in any name you want.
Absolutely.
Free web hosting, there are a lot of places you can get free web hosting without having to confirm who you are. There are a lot of places where you can join.
And there's no question. There's no question.
So should all those people lose the safe harbor because
if
they
you
don't
want access to the safe harbor? But those, even though it would benefit them, it's a business choice whether or not to choose to use the business. Just like you said, it's a business choice not to. It's a business choice to get this information. It's a business choice whether to hide behind and cower behind the DMCA safe harbors or to utilize them.
That brings me to my next question for you, Mr. Cuban, which is, you've said, hide behind, cower behind the DMCA safe harbors. I hear a lot of that rhetoric in this debate. I of course say that, these YouTube and Yahoo and all of these companies are just following the law. So, but let me ask you then, let's go to that question. What do you think the DMCA safe harbors are for? What do you think, what was the purpose behind putting them in there? I mean, you might want to say a few words. You obviously were there. You were involved in some of those negotiations. So tell me from your
for a true hosting company. So where I thought the DMCA was who they were meant to protect. If I'm Bell Atlantic, if I'm an ISP, and I know who my customers are. I'm AOL, and I have a relationship with those customers. And they upload something that they don't own, and they make an attempt to distribute it in any way, shape, or form, then it's not my fault as an ISP. I know who my customer is. I can tell the copyright owner, here's the information. It's your choice to deal with the infringement as you so choose. They should be protected, right? Now, it also said in the DMCA that you can't alter the files in any way, shape, or form, right? You have to, the user uploads it, and you host it. That's why they call it web host, right? You host it. Now, the fact that YouTube transcodes it and specifically alters it in order to distribute it to anybody and everybody, not even on a stream, on a download, it's like, hey, anybody want a free copy of Mark's movie? Take it, please. That's not what it was meant to do.
Okay, so I think one of the reasons that I'm actually a big fan of the DMCA Safe Harbors is I think it created a zone of freedom where innovators, small companies, people who don't have the resources and the money to negotiate deals with every one of the big players before they open their doors. Obviously, YouTube, in its first days, would never have gotten its calls returned, much less actually gotten a deal from most of the heads of the major studios. So what the DMCA Safe Harbors have done is created a zone where people can build businesses where, sure, some infringement might occur, but as soon as a copyright owner complains, that content comes down. And what that's done is that's enabled new businesses to flourish, but it hasn't undermined copyright. It hasn't
enabled any new businesses to flourish. They're all getting their asses kicked.
MySpace,
right?
YouTube?
Well, no, MySpace, you're right. They should have been nailed early on. And they weren't, right? You know, the copyright owners, it came so fast like that, and they didn't get hit. But to say, look, here's like a free trade zone to take whatever you want, to steal whatever you want, that is certainly not what I recollect. Look, I fought the DMCA, a lot of the DMCA tooth and nail because, you know, it was all Orrin Hatch and his back pocket boys getting these things done, and it was scary. And if you look at the recent copyright board on webcasting, you can see how draconian and scary it would be, but it was not a free trade zone. It was not about, you don't have to go, those are called statutory licenses, and you're the lawyer, you know that stuff better.
It's not free trade, it's they complain and you take the stuff down.
No, they complain because it's accidental. If you look at eBay, their business is hindered by infringement, not helped by it.
What makes you say that?
eBay would tell you.
If eBay completes an infringing auction, they take a percentage off the top.
But they would rather
it
cost them more to deal with them. Their business would prosper more if they didn't have all those hassles of dealing with the takedown notices and dealing with the lawsuits, etc. Same with Amazon, same with everybody, but these little video sites. Because it's a never-ending cycle. I mean, it will never end. If it's just a free trade zone for anybody to say, throw it up on a website, distribute it any way, shape, or form, we're all in trouble because everything that we own is just going to be out there for anybody to take, and people will stop creating.
Your question to me, sir?
What do you think about the little pirate bays that are showing up behind private protection on YouTube and Google Video?
You mean the ability to put full clips up? I mean, say a little bit more about that.
Well, what's happening right now, to give you some background, what's happening right now, and it's ingenious, you know, if I upload my, let's say my music video collections, if we're talking about YouTube, or my movie collection, if we're talking about Google Video, I just keep it private. And then, in front of that, I take all the URLs that they've given to me, even though they're not published on Google Video or YouTube, and I create another website that just gives you the ability to search and find all this. It's actually no different than Pirate Bay. It's just not using BitTorrent and trackers to find it. It's letting Google subsidize the whole thing. Is that a good thing?
Well, my answer to that is it sort of fixes itself, right? Because if, in fact, it is people privately sharing, I mean, number one, I think all of us...
No, I didn't say privately sharing.
Well, okay, hang on.
Okay, I'm just saying they're using the private function,
I hear you.
publicly sharing.
There's two pieces, right? I'm going to answer both pieces, okay? If, in fact, it is people who are just using it for private sharing. Exactly. I think that's exactly right. Most content owners say, well, come on, that's, you know, share it with a few dozen of your friends. It's not the end of my business.
That's fine.
You know, so that's fine. And I think that seems fair. If you find out about it, fine, you can take it down. So what you're worried about is turning that around, putting it someplace, and turning it into a broadcast, kind of a medium where... Pirate. And so the answer to that is any place where, you know, the vast world of people who want to get your movie are able to find that link, you can find that link as a copyright owner. And that stuff can come down. You can send a notice to YouTube and say, found this private link, my content, take it down.
Are you serious?
You police Pirate Bay, you police all the other
sites. No. If Pirate Bay is just a way to present, that's a simple way to do it. You can, to a certain extent, police Pirate Bay. But it's like the old IRC chat where you have to be a member. So what's happening right now, Google and YouTube are subsidizing that whole thing, and you can't just find it. You have to know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. You know, the Sopranos can't even get in.
The funny thing about that story is that is exactly how the safe harbors, I think, are built to work. If you're a web hosting company and somebody comes to you gets space on your rack, says I'm going to buy, 40 gigs of space, fills it with infringing copies of The Sopranos,
And
puts it behind a password, only hands the password out, maybe puts the password on another page. The web hosting company is not responsible.
And you
because
took
if
my
they
bait
were,
completely because the operative word there was buy, right? And the key there is if I find it, I can find them,
Bingo.
right? But under Google Video,
if you find it, you
I
can
can't find them.
find them just as well.
How?
Google has the same IP upload records that a web host
No,
would
the
have
operative word
of
was
one of their
buy.
customers.
No, if they were a customer, right? If I upload to Google Video or YouTube, I'm not a customer. I'm just, letting them subsidize my bandwidth, and there's a big difference.
Maybe.
maybe about
We'll
it.
see. There are a lot of ways to host content where you can have someone else pay your hosting costs. Whether through, look at all the free hosting sites, right? The entire MP3 blogosphere is run on companies that provide free, undifferentiated, quote unquote free hosting, although in reality it's advertising supported hosting. They don't have, the MP3 bloggers aren't customers in the sense you described. They're not actually paying them in dollars and cents.
There's lots of people you could go after that the copyright owners don't go after because the cost is too great to go
So I'm just trying to clarify, are you saying then that all the free hosting companies are also not qualified for the safe harbors because they don't have a relationship with these customers, they host stuff for MP3 blogs?
Under my scenario, to qualify, because how we visualize what a web host is and what an ISP is or service provider is, there needs to be a specific relationship with your customer. And I think that was part of what the DMCA was trying to accomplish when it was introduced. So
The free hosting services don't really, again, they don't really
I'm not
have
against
that.
the free. No, that's by their choice. But if you choose to hide and cower behind the DMCA,
Well, they're doing that.
then you need to be able to identify yourself as a web host, meaning you know who your customers are, or a service provider, or an ISP, meaning you know who your customers are.
I'm just asking, is Pando hiding behind, are they cowering behind the DMCA safe harbors
Panda?
or not? Pando. People who provide 2 gigabytes of free web space for anybody in exchange for, you show ads to people when they come visit. Is that just as bad? It's hosting, it's monetized, but you don't know who the customer is.
Yeah, basically, because then that gets to another issue, the safe harbors, where you're making direct revenue from infringing content.
And I'll raise this because this is an EFF event. What about anonymous speakers? What about people who want to have a place on the internet where they can speak without having to be identified, have all their information taken down? Where does that leave them?
You go to 6 Apart, you set up a blog, you speak into a microphone, you put up your MP3, and you speak away.
And so long as 6 Apart knows who you are and how to
No,
find
not
you.
necessarily. No, but if you're trying to hide behind the safe harbor, if you say, you know what, I want safe harbor protection because I'm stealing content, then yeah, I'm going to give you need to give my name.
Right, but it's not the user there who ever needs the safe. The user never gets the benefit. The safe harbors are all for the intermediary. So it would be 6 Apart in that circumstance, or Pando, or whoever
But
it is.
where's the infringing content?
Where's
The anonymous, what's the relationship between anonymous and infringing content? So if you want to infringe, right, does it mean you want to stay anonymous? You want to stay anonymous, obviously. So by keeping them from being anonymous, maybe we reduce infringement, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. You're making it sound like infringement is a right.
Oh, no, I don't mean to say that. I'm just saying you have a world where, in order to speak anonymously, the only people who will take you as an anonymous speaker, as somebody who they don't know who you are, is a world where they can absolutely prohibit you from infringing.
Just don't infringe. And you can speak anywhere you want and not be at risk.
Right. I'm talking about the intermediary providing you the
Well,
service.
no, but again, it's the same thing. The intermediary, whether he knows who you are, if he doesn't hide behind the DMCA, then it doesn't matter.
I don't think anybody.
All you have to do is check and see. You've got your choice.
I don't think you can build a business without the DMCA, without quote unquote hiding behind the DMCA safe harbors. If you're having user-generated content,
right?
Some of that content's going to
You have the option to proactively
It's waiting
filter.
5
Okay, good. Well, that's good to know. That's good to know.
You have the option of proactively filtering to see what's infringing.
Well, that brings us to, I think, another good question. In your view, if YouTube did filter, if they went ahead and extended the same filtering privileges to any copyright owner who presumably would have to upload the fingerprints and otherwise cooperate with the system.
Put aside knowing their name, yeah, but
Right.
going through.
So if they did that, right, in your view, would that be enough? Would that restore the safe harbor?
Yeah,
What would that
because
mean?
as long as they were trying to catch everything, and even if things slipped through, I'd be fine with that.
When you say trying to catch, how hard do they have to try? When will they know if they've tried enough?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like porn. When you see if they're making an effort where, except in my case, it's a little bit shaky. But that kitty on kitty stuff on YouTube,
I thought you said there was no porn on YouTube, Mark.
You gotta know where to look, I guess.
Aha! So maybe they're not eyeballing every clip.
No, they are,
Mark gets
but
uploaded.
not before, afterwards. But back to your question, which was what?
Filtering. If they filtered, we
Yeah,
should
if
be
you're
good.
filtering, it's a continuous process of trying to catch everything and improving it, and they're making an effort to go after them. Yeah, you're going to miss them, and people are going to try to fake the system, and I'm fine with that. But in this case, I think they're proactively encouraging people. They're not out there saying, don't do it. They're not out there saying, please don't do it. They're saying, we don't see it, it ain't happening. And there's a big difference.
Well, I think the interesting thing about this is I think we are moving to a world that looks a lot like the one you described. Despite the fact that there are DMCA safe harbors, I think you're seeing it struck a pretty good balance because you have companies like YouTube, like MySpace, like a lot of the big players are voluntarily adopting the filtering systems you're talking about because they recognize they don't want to be a business that's built on infringement.
They're
going to get there.
All the other majors, MSN, Yahoo,
they're all moving that way.
They're already there.
Yeah.
They're already proactively filtering and have been. And MSN even shut down because they didn't think they can do a good enough job. The only outlier in that industry among the majors is Google.
Yeah, well, again, I don't think they're that much of an outlier.
Oh,
They've
they're
already
huge
agreed to do filtering for
After
a
you
lot of
sign up,
different
yeah,
partners.
after
And
you
there
sign up and
are a lot of partners signed up. So if the DMCA safe harbors, at the end of the day, allow businesses to start and to grow to a point where they then work out deals to use the content in new ways that require permission and maybe filtering and other things, it seems like an arc that makes some good sense. You incubate new companies that otherwise would never, I mean, come on, YouTube couldn't have done the deals and
You're
went on the
correlating
first
the
3
DMCA
months.
to new companies and company development. There's no correlation. There was never meant to be any correlation there.
See, that's
smart entrepreneurs can find smart ways to create smart companies.
See, and that's where I think, and to go back and to answer the question I asked of you, what's the DMCA for? I actually think if you look in the legislative history, Congress said part of what it was there for was to encourage investment in the internet, investment that otherwise wouldn't happen if you had uncertain
And they were talking about
copyright.
ISPs, right?
And web hosts. And search engines.
And they were thinking of ISPs as web hosts, people who had customers that were paying and had a business model.
Again,
like eBay for transactions, like Files Anywhere company I'm involved with that gets paid to host stuff. And there's a business model.
well, we'll find out, I suppose, for those...
Wait, do I have my turn for one more question?
Sure, go for it.
Red flag knowledge.
Oh, that's going to take more than our remaining 3 minutes.
We'll figure it out.
So, okay, red flag knowledge. So the DMCA safe harbors say that you lose, you disqualify from hiding, to use Mark's phrase, hiding behind the DMCA safe harbors, if you have actual knowledge of infringements, particular infringements, or you have...
Where did the particular come from?
well, we can talk about that, because that's, I think, the key. Or you are aware of facts and circumstances from which particular infringements would be obvious. And this is our debate. I think Mark's view is everybody knows that there's a lot of infringing content on YouTube.
Is there anybody here that doesn't know that there's a lot of infringing content? Do you know any 16-year-olds who don't know where to find it?
I could say the same thing about eBay, about web hosts, about Amazon, about search engines. That general knowledge can't be enough. Otherwise, the safe harbors would be useless pretty much for everybody.
Well, I understand your point.
So the
General
question is,
knowledge-
how much more specific does it have to be?
General knowledge can't be enough if it's just random, right? On eBay, it's random. It's intermittent. You'd have a hard time finding it, but you know it's there.
All I'll say is this. There's a court case. It's funny you should mention eBay. Author named Hendrickson sues eBay, sues Amazon then as well, both for their auction and Z-Shops and all of those merchant systems. Says, I have a movie. It's never been released on DVD. Every DVD listing you find is per se infringing. I guarantee it because I never released it on DVD. And the court said, fine, that's knowledge when you deliver it on that day. You tell them these shops, these auctions are infringing. But the next day, eBay and Amazon have no obligation to go out there and search on the next day and the day after that, or any further day.
Even though the infringement, in that case, and I'm not the lawyer, they ruled that the infringement was offline because it was in the selling of the VHS and the DVDs, right? The guy didn't have a lawyer, he represented himself, and he was kind of kooky according to everything I read, so we'll put that aside. But, are you trying to tell me that red flag, okay, you're trying to say particular,
Yeah,
right?
you have to tell me a URL.
No, that's the way you want it to be.
Yes.
That's the way you want it to be. But in reality, when you know that a good portion of your business, and you're doing a good portion of your business is based off that, and you even inflate the numbers, because if you put up an infringing thing, you don't really track the real numbers. You let those numbers get inflated by people doing refreshes. You want to max start it. So a lot of the numbers are BS, and you use those numbers to create more sales, more sponsorships, more revenue. And anybody and their brother knows where to find anything. And that's not red flag knowledge?
I don't think it is. If it were, I think a lot of internet businesses would be in a lot of trouble.
I don't think a lot of internet businesses.
On the other hand, when Viacom delivers 160,000 takedowns, which they have, those videos come down right away. And
that's not a clue that there's a lot of infringement going on, and maybe you ought to take a look at it. It's a big, significant part of your
copyright
business.
owners got the ability to very quickly, without having to file a lawsuit, without having to go to court, without having to do any of the work they would normally have to do.
And you know very
they
well
got
that
instant takedown.
When this whole thing, look, YouTube is already dust because the copyright owners are going to spend enough money, like they always have, to go to Congress and get this changed to their benefit.
Oh, you think so?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I mean, that's the way it got to this point, right?
Well, the internet industry, for better or for worse, looks a little different today than it did in 1997.
It's a little bit smarter, but not that much.
It's a lot bigger.
It's a lot bigger. That's true.
A lot bigger.
Ain't a whole lot smarter in terms of.
We'll see.
We'll see. You're right.
But I think everyone will agree. I don't think Congress is going to weigh in on this until after the courts do something, because everybody, I think, wants to see what happens. And so,
and I think where we disagree.
The first thing we'll see is what the court does.
Well, and I think where we disagree is in the little evaluations of terms by court. You know, what the precedent. You know, from everything I've been told, I'm not the lawyer. Everybody I've talked to has a good chance to change. And if they stick to this particular, piece of content, you may be right.
So I'll just say this.
And if they don't,
I'll just say this for information. There are going to be some great, interesting cases that come down that aren't YouTube, Viacom versus YouTube.
Sure.
There's TUR versus YouTube. That case, we're going to see probably a decision in the next couple months. That's the first copyright lawsuit against YouTube that's been in process now for several months.
Which gets this one little guy paying for it out of his own pocket.
Yep.
Who the EFF should get behind to help against the big guys.
And the other cases are 3 appeals brought by Perfect 10.
Right.
They're pending in front of the Ninth Circuit. They're going to touch on some of these same issues. So we'll know a lot more before the end of the summer in some interesting cases that are not Viacom versus YouTube. Who knows? By then, Viacom and Google may have cut a deal and gone away. But this issue, whether that case stays or goes, this issue is going to be with us. So thank you very much, Mr. Cuban, for joining us.